15.
Hi everyone, I'm Jen Lucas, Managing Editor of the Knitting Circle, and I'm here today with Brenda KB Anderson, the Managing Editor of Creative Crochet Corner, and we are going to be talking to you about how to make some quick accessories with leftover yarn. So you can see we have a ton of yarn around us, and so we're going to show you how to make both a knit and crochet project. And we are so glad that you're here with us today. And I'm so glad that you're here with me, Brenda.
Me too.
I love doing these lives with you. That's my absolute favorite. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that there is a PDF that you can download for today's event. And it will give you the instructions for both the knit and crochet project. So be sure to go ahead and grab that PDF using the link in the description wherever you're watching. And also we have a chat feature that you can use throughout our event where you can say hello, maybe let us know where you're watching from, what you're knitting or crocheting while you're watching us. And then also if you have any questions for either one of us along the way, of course, be sure to drop your questions in the chat and we will do our best to answer as many as we can over the next hour. So now that we kind of got the business out of the way, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're making today, Brenda?
All right.
Okay.
So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make the Merry and Bright scarf. So this is what it looks like. It's a kind of a large striped scarf and it looks marled because it has two different strands of yarn held together throughout the whole project. My inspiration, well, when I was designing this, I was kind of getting into the holiday mood and I was watching the Benedict Cumberbatch version of The Grinch and I was looking at all the awesome like sweaters and hats and giant oversized mufflers that they had and all the bright colors, and it really made me want to make something kind of almost comical but like warm and cozy and just have that sort of feel to it. So that's where my inspiration came from. Plus it also came from my basement yarn stash where I have too much yarn, and I was looking at all my yarn and thinking, I don't know about all these colors together, they're maybe a little too crazy, but then I realized, I can just add a neutral to it to tone it down a little bit. So so then I just added a white to all my crazy colors and it kind of muted it just a little bit. And then I finished it off with these very cute and a little bit silly pom-poms.
Love the pom-poms.
Which, of course, they're optional if you're not a pom-pom person like I am. Don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear about it because I love pom-poms. But maybe you're more of a fringe person, or maybe instead of fringe, you just want nothing on the end of your scarf, and that is totally okay too. So, do you want to tell us about your project, Jen?
Yes. So after I saw Brenda's amazing crocheted scarf, I wanted in on the action. And like Brenda, I have a ton of leftover yarn from all the different projects. And so I made a hat. And so my hat is knit. It's the odds and ends. Wait, why is that so hard to say? Odds and ends hat.
There's your tongue twister for today,
tongue
guys.
Twister. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, really. And so I made the hat, and so I used the same technique like Brenda did, where I held two yarns together. And actually, this is a companion to a cowl I did earlier this year, which is on the free patterns page for the Knitting Circle, which is the matching cowl. Well, mine don't exactly match because I use leftovers, but you can do the cowl as well. And yeah, so I just held more of like a cream, sort of beigey cream with my different colors and knit my hat. And what I love is if you both knit and crochet, you can make these together to match, and you have a matching set, and you've done
and they
both.
look like they go together.
And they look like they go together. We were kind of talking about how we thought the hat goes really nice with some of the different colors that you've chosen for your scarf. So yeah, we're really excited about working on these today. So why don't you go ahead and get started on how to make your scarf.
All right. Before I dive into the stitches, I just first wanted to talk about color a little bit, because I know a lot of times people will hesitate with colors. They feel like they need to have something chosen for them, or be able to look at something and make it just like the picture. But sometimes, when you're going through your yarn stash, you end up with lots of random different things and you don't really know how to combine them. But the good thing is with this project, like we said before, when you combine them with the neutral, it kind of tones them all down a little bit and makes them look like they belong together, even if you wouldn't necessarily have put them together before. But I just wanted to mention the way that I decided to stripe my piece. So the stripes are different widths, as you can see. This is a six rows, 2 rows, 4 rows, 1 and 3, and then that repeats across the scarf, all the way across the scarf. And I use that same pattern. That's actually what's in the download. I use that same pattern to do a couple other samples with different colors, just so you could see what they look like. So, and in this one, I tried to go cool, warm, and then like a neutral, and then start over cool, warm, and a neutral.
Nice.
That was sort of how I decided what colors should go where. And also, another thing to think about, if there's a color that really jumps out at you, like the yellow is just really bright and the orange is really bright, it's a little easier to combine them together. Not saying that if a whole yellow scarf is wrong or anything like that. I love yellow. But if you're looking for something that kind of is a little easier for your eyes to digest, usually if you use those super bright pops of color a little bit more sparingly and the neutrals a little bit more lavishly, then it kind of melds together a little bit better. So this is the one that's featured in the pattern, and then I did another sample with the same amount of stripes, the same amount of six rows, 4 rows. Whoops, I think I'm going from the wrong end. Yep, 6 rows, 2 rows, 4 rows, 1 and 3. It's the same as the other scarf, but this time I kind of went in the order of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what I had. I'm missing the orange, of course, but I just thought, well, let's just see what that looks like. So
I love it.
So that's another approach for color. And this one, I just wanted to show another example of how it can look if you use like a darker yarn. Jen had used a beige in hers, and that toned it down really nicely.
Yeah.
And she's got those really like a little bit more muted colors than my crazy orange and yellow to begin with, but it just has such a different look. And I just wanted you guys to be able to see, even though this is my Merriam Bright wild colors crazy scarf with the pom-poms, if you're not into that whole thing, you can definitely make something that's very toned down with the same pattern instructions, just choosing different colors. So here's another sample showing that. All right, so this scarf is just made back and forth and turned rows, and I used a stitch pattern called the knotted double crochet. And I'm going to show you, even though this is, let's see, I'm going to show you with this yarn, because I think this will be easier to see. This is, in the scarf pattern, we use 2 strands of yarn held together, but I want to just show you the stitch pattern with just 1 strand of yarn, because when I add that other color in there, it gets a little bit harder to see the stitches. So I just want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So to work in the knotted double crochet, which is like everything in crochet has a million different names.
That is
and
true.
then they're used for other things too, so it's so confusing.
Yes.
So I've seen it called knotted double crochet, which is what I first learned it as, but I've also since then seen it as the half double crochet herringbone stitch, or herringbone half double crochet, not to be confused with just a herringbone stitch, which is totally different. I feel like every time I do a live, I'm using some term and then I'm thinking, oh, people are going to think that it's a different stitch pattern, because I've seen it as other things. But
yeah, that happens in knitting too, but I think more often in crochet I see where things are called like
there'll be 2 different stitches called the same name, or 1 stitch called like 5 different names.
Right, exactly, yes, yeah.
It makes it very hard to get everyone on the same page when you're I don't know. Anyway, okay, so this is the knotted double crochet. Well, we're going to first do a chain of any amount. So I'll just chain a few. We don't need to get too crazy. And then we're going to add 1 chain for the turning chain onto that. If you find the edges of your scarf are too tight, you can do 2 chains if you like. And I know it's called the knotted double crochet, so you might be thinking, why aren't we doing a taller chain? But you'll see in a minute. It's not quite as tall as a regular double crochet. Okay. Right, and I really like to work into the bottom of my chain. So here's the top of my chain. It's got all these little V's stacked up, and if I roll it over to the back of the chain, or the bottom of the chain, I like to call it the bottom, there's all these little dashes, and that's what I like to work under, because then you end up getting a really nice edge that looks exactly the same as the beginning edge. Where's the end of my scarf? So, okay.
You made it Doctor Who length.
I know. Here's my Doctor Who. Okay, so you can see they look the same. So that's why I always work into the bottom of my chain. Plus, it's easier, and I like to take the easy road sometimes.
Yep.
So we're going to skip that first bump, work under the second bump, and to do the knotted double crochet, we're going to yarn over like we're doing a regular double crochet. Insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and continue pulling that through that first loop on the hook, like that. Then we'll yarn over again and pull through 2. Let's do that a couple more times. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, and continue through that next loop on the hook. Then yarn over again, pull through 2. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, and pull through that next loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. So this is like somewhere in between a half double crochet and a double crochet, but that little extra, just pulling it through gives you that little bump. Let's see, I don't know if I finished my stitch there. It gives you that little knot. So when you pull it through like that, that makes that little horizontal bar, that little knot there. So that's why I call it the knotted double crochet, because it just visually helps me. But you'll see the herringbone thing in a minute too when we switch to working across the other side. So when you get to the end, you're just going to chain 1 and turn. And then we are not going to count our churning chain as a stitch, so we're not going to work into that, but we are going to work into this first stitch here. So we're going to yarn over, and then insert, yarn over, pull up, and pull through that first loop, yarn over, pull through 2. This is exactly the same thing that we just did, just working it across.
I've never done that stitch before, but I think I will be going home and trying it because it looks really fun.
It's fun, and the reason I chose this stitch for this scarf is because those little knotted parts, they make a nice little horizontal, bar, so it kind of highlights that marled look.
Yeah.
Like I liked how it looked. Plus, the other thing about this stitch that I really like is that it's fairly, I don't want to say dense because that makes it seem like it doesn't have any drape. It has a lot of drape, but there aren't a lot of big holes or windows through your stitches. A lot of times, like if I was doing a regular double crochet, there'd be all those holes between in order to give it that nice drape that you'd want in a scarf. But this is connected. It's a little bit shorter, but it's not as stiff as like a single crochet.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have the holes that the double crochet would have between. So that's part of the reason that I really like this stitch for a scarf, because you don't want it to be incredibly stiff wrapped around you. It doesn't stay there.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
So you want to have some drape, but you also don't want the wind blowing through your scarf because that's just sad.
Yeah.
All right, so let me get across this row and then I will show you what this looks like and why it's called the half double crochet herringbone also. You can't really see the herringbone look too much in the marled, when we're crocheting with 2 strands of yarn held together. But now you can kind of see there's like this little zigzagginess going on. When you get, this is 4 rows here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so it kind of goes this way and then it kind of goes that way. So you kind of get this little herringbone appearance or whatever to the stitch. So let's just start by working our 2 yarns together so you guys can see what that looks like. So we're going to start this out, and I do have, specified in my pattern a gauge that you should match, but, having said that, as you make your scarf, it's not so wide that it's going to be a problem if you just start working back and forth on your scarf. If you skip the gauge swatch, I'm basically giving you permission to skip it. I know I'm the naughty one who doesn't want to swatch. But the other thing is you're making this scarf. You just as you work back and forth, look at the width of it and think, is this the width of the scarf I like? Is this the drape that I want? Because everyone's going to be using slightly different yarn. Even if you're using 2 strands of acrylic worsted yarn, which is what I used in my sample, and I'm also using an NP 10 millimeter hook, but you will use whatever you need to get the fabric you like and to get the size you want, basically. Even if you're using the same stuff, like for example, this scarf was made with 2 strands of worsted weight yarn, same hook, and this scarf was made 2 strands of worsted weight yarn, same hook. But you can see this one's about 1 inch wider, and it is a little bit stiffer. It hasn't been blocked yet, which it'll get more drape after I block it, steam block it. You know, I'm getting 2 different results using, and it's me doing it.
Right, yeah.
Like, I did it before, I made both of them.
Yeah.
But that just happens, you know. The yarn is not, they don't all have the same properties, so.
And I think too, if there was ever a time to not do a gauge swatch, it would be on a project like this where you're just using basically leftovers anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if you run out of something and your scarf's not long enough, just grab some more yarn.
Yeah,
you know?
add it onto it.
You just add on to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, really, yeah. This is like one of those times where you really do have permission to not
pretty
use
low
it.
key, you know. It's not a high stakes problem.
Exactly.
If you. All right, so I'm just making the same, you know, making some chains, but with my 2 strands held together as one. Okay. And I think I tell you to chain 15 for the adult size and possibly 8 or something for the kid size. Let me just check. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing.
While you're checking, we've put a poll into the chat for all of you to chime in on, which is, do you knit, crochet, or both? Let's see which craft wins.
Ooh, come on, crocheters. Come on. Make me proud.
Right. We've also have a bunch of people saying hello too from all over the United States, and we have somebody from southern Spain watching us right now.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so.
All right, so for the kids, let's make the kids for right now. That's actually 11. I lied. It wasn't 8. I don't know what I was thinking. But chain 11, and then we're going to skip that first chain, and we're going to work into the second. We're doing the exact same stitch pattern I just showed you, but now we're doing it with the 2 strands and a larger hook so that it will accommodate this thicker yarn that we just made by holding these 2 together. So I'm just working the knotted double crochet across. And this first row, you know, it's a little, if you've never done this before, holding 2 yarns together, it's not as hard as you might think. But for the first row, because it's always a little tricky working into your chain, you know, just give yourself a little extra grace, because if your chain is too tight, go back, rip it out, make a looser chain, you know. It's that kind of situation. You just want to get the chain to be loose enough so that you can work into it easily. And this is maybe a little bit larger of a hook than I would normally use for these 2 strands put together, but we just really want it to be, you know, able to have some drape. So, all right, we're at our last chain here. And then we're going to chain 1 and turn. And then we're going to work across in this direction. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, and pull through that first loop on the hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, and pull through that first loop on the hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. All right. So we're just going to continue working back and forth. And in this pattern, I tell you to work 6 rows of the first color before we switch to the second color, which will look like this. Okay, there's my 6 rows. And if you're having trouble counting, now that we have, you know, worked in 2 yarns, it could just be a little overwhelming and it might be really hard to tell where your rows are. I would just recommend holding it, just pulling it open like this. Oh, it's a little hard to see on camera. Maybe I can put something dark underneath. Well, nope, that's not working. But if you pull it like this, you can kind of see those holes in between your rows then, okay? If it's just like this, it's really hard to tell, but if you just open it up just a little or put it up to the window, you will be able to see it if you put it up to the window.
Yeah.
Then you can count your rows. And that, you know, you probably have to do that a couple of times before you just sort of get used to how to count your rows and how to look at it so you can tell where your stitches are. All right, so let me back up and we'll just do our very last stitch So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, pull through that first loop on the hook, and then we're going to stop at this point and we're going to join our next color. So to do that, because we're switching colors back and forth all over the place, you're going to have some yarn tails to weave in. So I wanted to eliminate as many as I could while we're working. So this is the method that I came up with. So before you do that last yarn over, we're going to cut the old color. Now you don't ever cut your neutral. Don't cut the white or the tan or whatever color you're holding with it. But you're going to cut the old color, and then you're just going to lay the new color in with your old. So you've got all 3 strands here. So I have a white, a yellow, and the teal. Then we're going to yarn over with everything, pull through here, and then just go in here with your fingers and pull out the old strand. Just pull it up like this. And what that does, let me show you underneath here, it makes it pop out right in the middle of that stitch right there, right in the middle of that V. So then you can lay it right on top of your work. You don't have to pull it up next to your project and then try to crochet over it. We're just pulling it out right there, and then we're going to lay it down on top. Now you could also bring that yellow up to crochet over it, but then you have like a little yellow kind of covering up that color. So I just leave the new color tail hanging and I weave those in later. But the old color, you can just crochet over it, and that will eliminate some of the ends that you have to weave in.
That's a really good tip.
So we're gonna, I have never done that before. I did it by accident when I was working on this, and I was like, hey, it's right where I want it to be.
Yeah, that's really great.
Thank you,
accident.
start
doing that too.
All right, so then we're gonna yarn over with the new colors. We're making a chain, and we're turning, and then we're going to hold that old color along the top edge and crochet over it. Okay, so we're gonna continue with our knotted double crochets all the way across, just encasing that yarn. And you might decide, okay, after I work a number of stitches, I can just clip that old yellow, I don't know, I just got confused by my yarn. It just yelled in my face, yellow. You can clip that old yarn tail, is what I was trying to say, and just let it be in there. Or if you're me and you're really worried about your yarn tails popping out later when you whip it through the wash and you don't want to see them ever again, leave your yarn tail maybe a little longer than this, hanging out, and then you can weave it in one more direction. Like if it goes this way, I usually weave it in kind of sort of back that way later, so that it's not going to come out, because they work their way out in the wash. Oops.
Let's see, we have some people chiming in about if they knit or crochet, and actually everybody that's commented so far has said they do both.
Oh, cool.
Danielle says, I do both, but was into crochet before I took up knitting. Barbara says they do both. Elizabeth, both, but knows more about crochet. And Kathy says started with crochet, then switched to knitting. So
oh, cool.
We have multi-crafters here.
That's awesome. That's well, we are those too.
Yeah, we both as well.
Do both.
Yep, we both do both. Yep.
So, yes. Well, they are very strongly related, even though some people may have very strong opinions about one craft over the other, and that's fine too. But
yeah.
Okay, so you can see, let's see, maybe we'll just do one more. I'll show you that little trick one more time. We'll do one more row of the knotted double crochet on the way back. And then we'll switch to the next color, and I'll show you that color change just one more time.
I know I want to see it one more time so I can use it on my project when I start this.
This is for you, Jen. I'm just doing this for you.
Do it for me, so when I start this project later today, I know how to crochet over that end in a very clever way.
You're going to add this to your big stack of projects, Jen?
Yes, I am going to add it to my big stack of projects. Sure am. Okay, let's see. Oh, so the poll that we posted in the chat, so far we have 16 people have said they do both. 6 people crochet and 1 knit. Oh, you're winning.
Crocheters, unite. Okay, just kidding. I love you knitters too.
And Jade says, I started with knitting and then learned how to crochet, which is what I did. Did you learn to crochet or knit first?
I learned how to crochet when I was really little, like 5 or something, maybe younger.
Yeah.
And then I did that for a little while. After I made clothes for all my Cabbage Patch Kids, I put that away. But then when I had this idea in the 20s that I wanted to play with yarn again, then I was a knitter. I considered myself a knitter then. But then for some reason I just kept going back to crochet because it was easier for me to think about, easier for me to design with, I guess. But I love them both for different reasons.
Same.
And okay, so here we are at the very last stitch before you do your last yarn over, and we're gonna do the color change. So give yourself, enough yarn that you can weave it in and clip it off. And then let's see, what's my next color? This mint.
I love that mint color.
I know, isn't it pretty?
So pretty.
All right, so then we're gonna lay this, leave a little bit of a tail back here. And then, because you're going to weave that in later, just lay it and put all 3 strands together. Use your crochet hook to do that last yarn over. And then you're going to just go in here and pick out the color, the old color. Just pull that through. And what that did was it just pulled it right out of the center of that V. And then we can lay it right down the middle. It's just centered and ready to go, begging to be worked over and hidden forever and never coming out, right? So we just chain 1 and knotted, double crochet all the way across, working over that strand right there. All right, so we would just continue working back and forth, and like I had said before, you're gonna do 6 rows of this first color, 2 rows of the next color, 4 of the next, 1, and then 3, and then you repeat that. This is all in your pattern. You don't have to remember this. You repeat that over and over until it's the length that you want. I think there's maybe like 6 repeats or something like that for the adult size and maybe 5 for the kids. And then at the very end, so this is where we ended with this last repeat, and then there's one more, I just did one more little panel so that the 2 ends would match each other, because I really like things to be sort of like haphazard looking, but like not too crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that and then I have these crazy pom-poms.
Right.
There's a line that, I just, for some reason when I did this and it ended with the brown, I was like, no, I gotta do one more of the blue and then I can stop, and then I made matching pom-poms on the end. Actually, the first time I did this, I had all kinds of random pom-poms, and then it was too much. So I had to back up and switch out some of my pom-poms. But yeah, so that's the basic, the basic way you create the scarf. Jen, do you want to talk about your hat?
Yes. So for my hat, I've written it for a few different sizes. It starts at child and goes up to adult extra large. So you can make one for everybody in your family. And so you're just going to need, I used bulky weight yarn with mine, held double. So that's what you're going to need, and all the yardages and everything, like same with your pattern, are listed in the pattern. As far as when I changed my colors, I just wrote the pattern as a general hat pattern, and then in the pattern notes I said where I changed my colors. So if you do want to copy where I changed, you can. But yeah, so we can just go ahead and get started. So there's one little thing in the pattern that was missing, and that is I actually used 2 different circular needles. I started with a smaller circular needle for the ribbing and then increased to a larger, or switched to my larger needle. So for the pattern, you're going to need both a US size 9 and a US size 11 16-inch circular, and then also US size 11 double pointed needles. So that's just one little change to the pattern that we will be updating. And so I'm going to start with my smaller needle and 2 strands of yarn, and I'm just going to do the same thing as Brenda. I held my neutral color, I held it for the entire piece, and then I just kept bringing in my other color as whenever I felt like it, really. Yeah. I didn't really plan my color changes out in the way that Brenda did. Brenda really, I love the way you did your stripes, and maybe you want to follow that pattern for your hat.
Yeah, but I was going to say too, like you could certainly make this scarf like how Jen made her hat.
Absolutely.
You just bring in the colors whenever you want them. Yeah. I was thinking about this yesterday, and I thought, well, if people wanted it to be symmetrical, but they didn't really know how much yarn they had exactly, which hopefully we'll get to talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Knowing how much yarn you have. You could start in the middle of the scarf and crochet in one direction and then mirror it as you go. So like you could do some stripes and then do the mirror it so you have the same stripes in the same color, and then add some more stripes, and that way when you start repeating, you're gonna run out of yarn on both ends, and it's going to be like a symmetrical thing if you care about
really
being
cool.
symmetrical. Or you can just throw caution to the wind and stripe it however you want to, which is actually kind of more my style.
Yeah, because like with this hat, like this light blue that I had, like this was all of the light blue that I had like in that particular ball of yarn. And so like I just knit this part until I ran out of that blue, and then I was like, okay, well I guess it's time to switch now.
The yarn is telling me to change.
Yeah, yarn is telling me to change because I don't have any more of it. Okay, so I'm going to take my smaller circular needle and I'm going to do my cast on, and I like to do the German twisted cast on. So I start by wrapping my yarn held together around my needle, and I'm going to wrap it around 15 times. Basically what I'm doing is I'm going to estimate the tail I need to do the German twisted cast on, because you need a long tail. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And so I pull that off and I say, okay, 15 times around, I estimate as 10 stitches for a German twisted cast on. If I'm doing a long tail cast on, I wrap it around 10 times and say that's 10 stitches. But German twisted, I do 15 because you need more yarn for that one.
It's kind of like 1.5
per
wrap, like 1.5 wraps per stitch.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you just fold it over until you have however many stitches you need. And you know, if you're making something that's not a hat and you're using this technique, I also then add a little more, just as like, you know, an insurance policy.
Yeah.
And then we're going to just make our slip knot there and stick it on our needle and start casting on. So I'm going to do the German twisted cast on. And so you hold your yarn just like you would with a long tail. With the long tail, you go through the loop and around the yarn on your index finger. With the German twisted cast on, you go under both loops on your thumb, or under both strands on your thumb, through the loop on your thumb, come around, grab that yarn on your index finger, and you have a little X here on your thumb from when you brought the needle through. So you just need to uncross it and bring your needle through again, and then tighten your tail down. So I have my tail on my thumb and my working yarn, which is going to my ball of yarns, over my index finger. So again, under both strands on the thumb, through the loop on my thumb, come up and around on the index finger, uncross the loop on my thumb, bring the needle back through, and then I use my thumb to just tighten that stitch down by just pulling on the tail a little bit. And so the reason I like this cast on is that it's stretchy, because you know the worst thing is when you make a whole hat and then it doesn't fit on your head because you didn't have a stretchy enough start. So you would just keep working that for the size that you need. I'm just going to do the smallest size of the pattern and do 36 stitches, but you would just do whatever size, you know, for whatever hat you're going to make. And you would just keep working that. Again, the yarns are held together, and then at that point you would have something that looks like this. So here I have 36 stitches cast on, and now I'm going to join in the round. And then the way I like to join in the round is I actually will then cast on one more stitch than what the pattern calls for. So I do have a long enough tail here that I can do one more German twisted cast on. And so now instead of, I had 36 stitches, now I have 37. And so I'm going to bring my needle around so I can join in the round. Let's make sure we're not going to knit with our tails. Do you end up knitting or crocheting with your tails all the time?
Yeah.
Yep.
Not crocheting as much, but the knitting thing. When I'm doing the circular thing, it's just like, I get myself all confused.
Exactly.
Yeah,
me
like,
too.
I'm always knit about 3 stitches, and I'm like, oh,
I'm out of yarn. Yeah. So now, because we cast on that extra stitch, we need to get rid of it. But this is how I join in the round, like neatly and tightly, and I just think it looks a little better and cleaner. So I'm going to slip the first stitch that I knit, or that I had cast on. I'm going to slip that stitch purlwise from the left needle to the right needle, and then I take that extra stitch that I cast on and I bring it up and over that first stitch. So I just bound off that extra stitch, and now I'm back at my original stitch count. And then it'll be a little bit loose because the stitch you just bound off was the last stitch you cast on. So I just tighten it just a little. I never crank down on anything. And then we will just get a stitch marker and put it here for the beginning of our round. So I'll use this red one. It'll be festive.
I was watching your live yesterday and I saw you do that slipping the stitch over, and I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've never done that before, and I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah. There's a few different ways that you can join in the round and get it a little tighter, but this one is my favorite, so this is the one I'm always doing now.
It's just really simple, and it looks so nice.
Yeah, it just looks nice, and because sometimes when you're knitting in the round, you get that like strand,
yeah.
and it goes away, but then it's like kind of loose. I don't know. So this eliminates that whole problem.
This is just really satisfying because it just looks good from the beginning.
Yes,
like, as soon as you do it, it looks fine.
Yeah. And then we're just going to start the ribbing. Again, I started with that smaller circular needle. Again, that was not listed in the materials. We missed that, but we will be updating the PDF. So if you come back tomorrow and re-download it, that'll be fixed. But I'm using that smaller circular needle, and I'm doing a knit 3, purl 1 rib all the way around. So I'm just knitting 3 stitches and then bringing the yarn to the front and purling a stitch, bringing the yarn to the back and knitting 3 stitches. And the main thing you just want to remember is you're holding the yarns together. So when you're working into each stitch, you're treating both strands like it's a single stitch, just like you were doing with the crochet, even though you have those extra strands. You're just treating them as one strand. Probably the most common mistake I make when I'm holding my yarn doubled like this is I accidentally will knit into just like one strand and then knit into the other one, and now I've made an extra stitch, which I probably would just knit 2 together on the next round, to be honest. I don't know.
You'd never be able to see it. Like with this marled yarn, it's very forgiving if you make a mistake.
Exactly. You can't really tell. It's very forgiving. So you're just going to work that knit 3, purl 1 ribbing for the specified number of rounds for the size that you're making. And then when you're done with that, you'll have something that looks like this. And then we're going to switch to that larger needle, and maybe I'll go ahead and switch my yarn color at the same time. Again, I just switched whenever I felt like it. So, so let's see. I think I have one more stitch to finish out this round. So let's do that. And I'm just going to take my stitch marker off for the moment since I'm switching to a larger needle. And I just weave in all my ends at the end. I don't do anything with trying to like weave them in as I go.
That's a little trickier in knitting.
Yeah, it is a little bit trickier.
You can do it, but it's not. It's going to slow you down, and it might not be worth it.
Right. Like for me, for the most part, I'd rather just weave them all in at the end. That's just my personal preference, but you do whatever you want. So I'll grab this yellow. You had yellow, so I'm going to copy you now and grab my yellow. And so I just hold the new yarn behind, leave a little tail. I usually just kind of pinch it with my middle finger here. And then we're going to switch to our larger needle. So I'm going to grab my larger needle and just start knitting. Now we're just going to be knitting all the stitches. So I still have that kind of cream beige yarn. And now I'm just holding it together with the yellow. And then I'm just switching to the larger needle. So it's a little bit fiddly. Only because it's like one needle is losing stitches, so it's flopping around, and then the other needle's gaining stitches. So it could be like a little cumbersome because you've got this hanging, but it's just this one round, and then we'll just be using the larger needle for the rest of the time. So you're just going to knit around, and then you're just going to keep following the pattern as it's written. And so all you're doing is switching colors, basically whenever you feel like it, or you can use what I put in the pattern notes for the pattern, and then we're going to be knitting 3 rounds, and then we're doing a little bit of seed stitch, which is just knit 1, purl 1 all the way around, and then purl 1, knit 1. So that's really not that different from what we did in the ribbing. It's just, you're just switching back and forth every stitch between knit and purl. And then at some point, again, however it's indicated in the pattern, you're going to start doing your decreases. And so the decreases that I did, and I put this giant pom-pom on, so it might be a little hard to see, but I did the decreases such that it kind of makes like a square at the top. I used central double decreases because I just thought it looked nice. It's a little hard to see on camera here. It just makes like a nice little line when you're using the yarn held doubled, I thought. So I'll show you how to do one of those rounds. So to do that, let's see, we got our stitch marker. Okay, we don't need to go down to our double points just yet. So for our decreases, you knit 3 and then do the central double decrease, which is slip 2 as if to knit 2 together, and you're going to slip those to the right needle, knit 1, and then pass the 2 slip stitches over the knit stitch. And so it makes the stitches kind of all fall on themselves, and so you just have like one distinct stitch in the front that you'll see, and then that'll kind of form the line as you go up, and then we'll just knit 3 more. And that's the repeat. So it's knit 3, central double decrease, knit 3 for this size. So you will just refer to the pattern for the size you're making to make sure. It just will be more knit stitches in between that central double decrease. So we'll do that again, knit 3.
While you're doing that, I just wanted to mention, I should have mentioned this earlier, but there is a little typo in the crochet section, in the crochet pattern. If you look at, let's see, what page are we on? On page 7, it says rows 14 to 16, chain 1, turn 1, knotted double crochet into each stitch, chain 1, turn, change to color A on last yarn over of last stitch of row 16. That should be actually color B, because color A is the color you hold throughout.
Ah, yes.
So please change that in the rows 14 to 16. Please change that to color B. And then also two rows below that, it says repeat rows 7 to 22 another 4 to 5 times until scarf reaches desired length, and then fasten off. So when you do those repeats, you do not actually have to change color on the very last stitch of the very last repeat. Like on the very last stitch you make in your scarf, you don't need to change color. So I'm just making that a little bit more clear. I think you guys probably would realize that, but you know, sometimes it can be a little bit confusing when you're reading patterns. So
okay, let's see. We have well, we have some comments here, so let's see what we got quick. All right, so we have someone that says, Daria, I think, just learned that cast on, and I love the hint to join. Yes, that the joining, that's key. That was a game changer once I figured that one out. Dawn says, thank you for the tip on joining. Oh, well, you're welcome. And Sarah says, this is a question for you.
Okay.
She missed the beginning of our live, which first of all, you can watch it back later if you did miss any of it, because we do put them up on the website for you to watch later. So if you want to go back, you can watch it. But Sarah wants to know, is there a difference between a knotted double crochet stitch and a double crochet stitch? They seem the same to me, but it's all new, she said to her. So.
Oh, okay. Yes, there is a difference. Let me demonstrate that. Is that okay if I just jump
go right
in
ahead.
And do that?
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Just choosing a yarn, you'll be able to see a little more clearly. So the difference is there's one. So you end up pulling your loop through in 2 places. Well, let me just show you. Better.
Yeah.
Okay, here we have a chain. All right, I'm going to be working into the bottom of my chain, but it doesn't matter, just to show you the knotted double crochet. So you're going to yarn over like a regular double crochet, insert into your hook, or into your space, your chain. You're going to yarn over just like a regular double crochet and pull up your loop. And at this point, when you're doing a regular double crochet, you stop, and then you yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That's a regular double crochet. But in this pattern, instead of yarning over, you just continue to pull that loop that you just pulled up through that next loop on the hook. Then you yarn over and pull through 2. So we're kind of missing one yarn over, really. Let me show you one more time. So you'll yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, and pull through the next loop on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2. Like that. So yeah, really the only difference is you just keep going at this point, boop, pop it through, instead of doing a yarn over at that point, instead of the yarn over. So back to you, Jen, and your beautiful hat.
Great. I was just finishing the next round, which I was just knitting all the stitches. So that's what we're doing. Let's see. Oh, here's another question we have. Maybe more of a comment. One thing, Lucky Stamper. One thing I struggle with is the confidence to actually start a project. Like, for example, a blanket, the stitch maybe one I know, but I fear that I can't do it. So I love watching these videos and many classes on Craftsy. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And yeah, we love making these videos, and I've learned so much from watching videos too. I mean,
I have too.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing about this craft is like you can know a lot of stuff, but there's always so much more that you don't know. I mean, there's just so much to learn. You just can never stop learning when you do these crafts.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always learning something.
But me too. I want to say too, if you're hesitating to start something, just remember it's just yarn. And you know what? The awesome thing is with this is you can rip it all out. Even if you have to cut your yarn, if you get a big knot and you have to cut it, you can crochet it or knit it right back together and weave in those ends and no one will ever know. It's not like sewing where if you cut something, you might not be able to fix it. You might. There are things you can do, but it's a very forgiving, you know, it's just yarn. You know, it's just remember that, and you know, you can, that's how you learn things. You might make a lot of really ugly things when you start, like I did. Me too. But that's learning. That's just learning. So don't be afraid to jump in.
The first sock I ever knit, I thought was going to fit my foot, and it would have fit the foot of Bigfoot. So I mean, you know, but I learned something from that. So like, and I still have that one sock because I'm like, it's my first sock, but like no human person could ever wear it.
And there's really no way to get around just practicing, like making things. You might fail, it might be awesome, you don't know, but just doing it, you know, over and over. That's what makes you good at it, you know.
Yeah, actually, Donna here has a good suggestion, and it's exactly what you're saying. Donna says, I do searches when starting a stitch that I'm unsure of. So like you know, you can check out the internet. Everything's on the internet. And also, she'll then stitch, rip out, and repeat, and keep doing that same stitch, just almost making a swatch or something until you're comfortable. That's so true. I mean, and I've done that too. I mean, and even as designers, I mean, that's kind of what we do as designers too, is when we think we want to use a stitch pattern, we don't necessarily go and make the whole giant thing, you know?
No, there's lots of disasters along the way every time I design something.
Yeah, there's always lots of disasters.
You guys just don't get to see that part.
Yeah, you don't see the disasters.
Maybe we should have a live where we bring in our disasters and show them to you guys.
See, and Dawn is saying, I learned to crochet over 50 years ago, and I still Google stitches. So I mean, you know, there's so much information out there. Okay, so one last step of the hat that I want to show you is just switching to the double pointed needles. That's like the last main thing you probably need to know for finishing off your hat. So at some point, your hat is going to have too few stitches to be comfortable on your circular needle. And so at that point, you're going to want to switch to your double pointed needles. Now, I never list in my hat patterns at what point that's going to be, because I don't know what your tolerance for comfortably fitting on a needle is. But at some point, you're going to have to switch to those double pointed needles.
When you start finding yourself getting annoyed with your knitting? Is
basically, when I start getting annoyed with the stitches and I'm having to stretch them, then I'm like, okay, it's time. And what I do is I will knit my next round while simultaneously putting them on to the double pointed needles.
That's what I do too.
Yeah, so here I'm going to do round 3. So we're going to knit 2. I'm doing that onto my double pointed needle, and then I'm doing that central double decrease where I'm slipping 2 as if to knit 2 together, knit 1, pass the 2 slip stitches over the knit 1, and then knit 2, and do that all the way around. And the way I like to do my double pointed needles is I like to do them in like a triangle. So I have 3 needles that are holding the stitches, and then I am knitting with the 4th. I just like that configuration best for me, but you can also do it where you have 4 needles where you're have stitches on them, and then use a 5th needle to knit. It's really up to you, but I basically do just what I'm doing here. I've put 1/3 of my stitches on my first needle, 1/3 of my stitches on the second needle, and then I'm going to put half my stitches on the next needle. And I'm still just decreasing here.
That's how I like to do my double point needles too, with the 3 and then the extra one for the knitting. Because otherwise, when you have 4, it's like floppy.
Right. It's to me, it's just a little too fiddly, and I also don't know, because my first real experience with double pointed needles was knitting socks, and so I feel like a lot of sock patterns when I was learning to knit socks would specify to do the needles this way. Like sock patterns, I feel like, 15, 20 years ago, they would say needle 1, needle 2, needle 3, where they don't really say that anymore because there's so many different ways you can knit in the round.
Yeah.
So I feel like that might be part of the reason I like doing it this way too. But you can see I'm just knitting onto each needle, and then it's just hanging out. And then I go to the next one. And so now I have everything on my double pointed needles. And again, we like that triangle shape, but you can do it where you have the 4 that makes a square if that works better for you. And you would just keep following the pattern till the end to finish off your hat. But that's really all there is to it. It's a pretty simple pattern. Again, it's just got that little bit, it's got the ribbing at the beginning, and then stockinette, seed stitch, and then just the decreases. And then I used a store-bought pom-pom on mine, which I just ordered like a pack of 12 off the internet. And then I actually learned this tip from Brenda. They come really smushed in the bag when you get them. So I used my hair dryer to fluff it up. I just don't touch my hair dryer to it, but just to kind of fluff it up a bit, and then just attach the pom-pom. But I think I want to see how you make your actual pom-poms for your scarf.
So we've got all these tiny little pom-poms here, and I forgot to bring my cardboard over here, so I'm going to be showing you how to do this on a yarn label. So that'll be an extra bonus of fun.
Oh, fun.
I'm going to make a purple one. All right, so you should have a 2-inch piece of cardboard. I think this is probably close to 2 inches. It might be just a little bit smaller. And to make your pom-pom, let's say this is the bottom of your scarf. You're going to have one piece of yarn that matches something in this bottom stripe. It could be the color A, or it could be the color B, whichever color you choose. I'm going to choose the turquoise so that you can see it a little bit better. And you're going to cut a piece that's about maybe 32 inches, I think I say, but you don't need to measure that. You can just kind of eyeball that and set that aside. And then you can cut one piece of yarn that actually matches the pom-pom you're making. So this one is going to be about half as wide, 16 inches or so. Doesn't need to be quite that long, but. And then, so we're just setting this aside for right now, and then you're going to wind your yarn around your piece of nice and sturdy cardboard, not a yarn label like this. But if you don't have cardboard, this is a good substitute. I just folded my yarn label a couple of times for stiffness there. So we're going to just wind this around, and I think I say to wind it about 100 times, but if you're not a counter, you don't have to. You can just wind for a long time.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Wind until there's a lot of yarn wrapped around, yes.
So let's see. I think I need maybe 50 more. Maybe this won't be quite as plump because I don't have a piece of cardboard, but I think I can still do it. So one thing I was going to say too, when I was making these pom-poms, I was thinking, okay, should I continue to hold the yarn together to make the pom-poms and make them speckly pom-poms? Because that would be cute too. But then I was like, oh, well, you know what? I kind of want people to see the color of the yarn before it's diluted by color A, you know, on the end, and have a little extra, I don't know, it just kind of stands out a little bit more.
Yeah.
But that's just another way you could go. If you feel like your pom-poms are standing out too much and they're too bright, you could definitely hold your 2 strands of yarn together and then just wrap it half as many times, because you're wrapping it twice as fast, if that makes sense. All right, so you're going to take your shorter piece of yarn that matches your pom-pom, and you're going to slide it under those loops, and then you're going to tie it right in the middle of those loops. And you got to tie it really tight, and if you have a buddy, they can put their finger there. But if you don't have a buddy, if you rotate this like 180 degrees, for some reason, it helps it hold that, helps hold that little tie, so you can get the knot in after that. So I knot it a couple of times, okay, and then you can leave it be. Then you're going to flip it over to the other side, and you're going to tie a knot with this held double. And so the reason I do this is because sometimes we're using a really nice wool yarn or something, and you have to tie this knot pretty tight to hold your pom-pom strands. You don't want them to fall apart, and it might, break your yarn. The other thing is, if you are using a weaker yarn, just for this tying part, use embroidery floss or a very sturdy acrylic yarn, something else. Don't try to tie it really tight with something if it's breaking, because it might break while you're wearing it, and that would be sad. All right, so we've tied a knot on this side, we tied a knot on this side. Then we are going to just slide out your cardboard, and then you're going to use those same yarn tails, wrap them around, and now you're basically tying the whole pom-pom. Okay, so we're tying from, this was attached to this side, we wrapped it around the sides, and we are tying right in exactly the same spot that we've already tied. That first place we tie, you don't have to do that part, but it makes it so much easier to get this tied nice and tight. So I always like to just add that. It doesn't take that much extra time. Then you're going to hold on to those strands, and you're going to cut through your loops. This is always my favorite part of making pom-poms.
This is the best
part. It's like, yay! Be free, pom-pom. Be yourself. There we go. Okay, so it looks a little crazy, right? This pom needs a haircut. There's lots of unevenness going on, and you just need to kind of sculpt it. You just need to make it into a round ball. I find with making my pom-poms this way that it always is really tall on top. There's lots of extra hairs sticking up on the top, and maybe not so much around the sides, and then a little extra on the bottom as well. But you just look at your pom-pom and try to make it into as nice of a sphere as you can.
It's one of those things where I say it's more of an art than a science.
Oh, definitely more an art than a science.
Yeah,
this is just, you can just kind of veg out and give it a cute little haircut. Just kind of fluff it up a little. And if you see anything sticking out, cut them off. Okay, so I don't think I wrapped this I don't think it was 100 times, because this looks a little more sparse than my other pom-poms. But now you get the idea of what happens if you don't count.
Yeah. And I would say for your project, since you're adding so many pom-poms, you probably do want to count so that your pom-poms end up pretty uniform.
Yeah, unless you just have a knack for sizing it up with your eyeballs, but yeah. All right, so I think I made a big enough mess. So the reason we used that contrasting color is so that we can tie our pom-poms, sew it into the bottom of our scarf, and you can anchor it pretty well without actually having to see those yarn tails sticking out in a different color. So let me grab my yarn needle. And what I did was I put a pom-pom at each corner, really close to the very corner. And then I divided that, extra space up by putting 2 more pom-poms. For the kids' size, since it's a little narrower, I suggest you only put 3, so 1 here, 1 here, 1 there. But of course, this is, you are the driver, and you can decide how you want to do this. You're making your own project, so you can make really big pom-poms, really tiny pom-poms. You can put them wherever you want. You can add more pom-poms. You could have no pom-poms. Sniff. So basically, I just put the strand through, and I'm going to tie it in a knot to the other side, like this. And tie it pretty securely. And then once you do that, then you can weave in your ends. And luckily, it's the same matching color because we thought of that ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so you shouldn't be able to see your yarn tails once you do that. And when I weave in my yarn tails, especially on something that's going to be washed, I like to split through the yarn itself, like not just going in between the strands, but splitting through the strands, because that just creates a little bit more friction, and it'll keep your yarn tails from popping out.
I do the same thing. I always, at some point, will split a few plies of the yarn just to
it just really helps it. Yeah, especially if you're using a yarn that's slippery or kind of larger, thicker yarns, it seems like they want to pop out more. So, so you just weave them back and forth in a couple of directions. I like, if I'm being very thorough, I like to go in 3 different directions. switching directions each time. So that way it's not gonna pull out. So then it's securely fastened.
pom-pom.
Yay, it's so adorable. All right, it looks like we have a couple minutes. I
Yes.
just wanted to talk a little bit about knowing how much yarn you have. So this is just, don't be scared when you see the math that's happening, because it's not scary. It's not scary. If I can do this math, you can do this math. Okay, it's just a very simple ratio. And I should have brought my calculator. But you could calculate. Can you calculate for me?
Yes, I have a phone right
All right,
here with
so
a calculator on
say
it.
for example, you have this skein of yarn. You can see you've used some of it, but you really don't remember how much you used. If you look at your yarn ball band, it'll say how many yards or meters, and it'll say how much it weighs, almost always.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at this, it says 218 yards, and it weighs 100 grams. Okay, so you know for a full skein of this yarn, you would have, if it was full and you hadn't used any of it, you would have 218 yards, and it would weigh 100 grams. So if you have a kitchen scale, which I use all the time for my yarn projects.
Yeah, I have a kitchen scale that I only use for yarn.
I just realized I have like so many things attached with all this. It's like a spider web of yarn
Yeah,
everywhere, making a huge mess. Okay, so if you have a kitchen scale, or you can actually, I mean, this is technically a yarn scale because I bought it from a yarn company, but you can use a kitchen scale, just anything that's pretty sensitive. And make sure you put it on the grams. So it probably will have ounces and grams, but put it on whatever your ball band says. This one is grams. So, and then just weigh your yarn. This says 55.5 grams. So we are gonna write that down over here, 55.5 grams. That was 100 grams. So to do this very simple math, you take this number on top, 218 times this number down here, which is 55.5.
Okay.
And then, so this is times, and then you divide it by 100 grams.
Divided by 100.
And then what does that equal?
120.99. Well, we'll call that 121.
120. Ooh, I'm going to erase that. Okay. 121 yards. So that's how you find out how much yarn you have left if you have a kitchen scale and you just have, of course you have to have the ball band, or if you don't have the ball band and you can remember the brand of the yarn, a lot of times you can find that information online. So
yeah, that's a great tip. Yeah.
So yeah, that way if you're making this scarf and you're like, I have a bunch of leftovers, but I don't know how much, what does 55 yards look like? What does 120 yards look like? I don't know. So that way you can weigh what you have and figure out what you actually have in your stash.
That's a great tip, and yes, perfect for both of these projects. Well, thank you so much, Brenda. I'm so glad we got to do this today. This was so fun. And thank you all for watching. Right quick before we go, here are our final results of knit versus crochet. Both is 16. 6 for knitting, 7 for crochet. So crochet won out in the end. So there you go.
But it was close.
It was very close. We're glad that we have people that love both, and we hope if you only do one or the other, maybe this event will encourage you to try the other one.
Check out the other craft too. Yeah,
for sure. Well, thank you everybody for watching. We hope that you enjoyed our tutorials today. And if you do go ahead and make some of these, we would love to see them. So be sure to tag us on social media. Some of our websites have project galleries where you can post your photos. So we always love to see that stuff. We love to see what you're making. So please be sure to tag us in your future projects. So thanks everybody, and happy knitting and crocheting, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.